This is Professor Tommy Demos, and today I will be demonstrating the use of the Rotobrush. There are times when we know we want to remove the background because we shoot a subject in front of a green screen or a white screen, and our intention is to replace that solid background color with something else. But then there are times when we need to remove a foreground element from a normal video, from a background, and it is not a solid color. There's no green, no white. So how do we cut out something that's moving from a background? And that is the Rotobrush. So I have a pretty difficult example of it, and we're going to do the best we can. It's not going to come out perfect, but I want you to understand the principle behind it because this is a very useful tool. The first step is to save the project, save as. We will choose the student hard drive and find the MDC folder. Oh, very good. This student is organized. And inside of in-class exercise, we will call this one last name, first initial underscore E5 underscore roto brush. Roto, of course, is short for rotoscope, which is where you manually trace the perimeter of an object or of a layer. And manual stinks, man. And we've got technology today that's automated, so we hardly ever do manual rotoscoping anymore. So I'm going to save this, double click the project panel. We're going to go to the student hard drive, and under the MDC folder, DIG, DIGFX comp, HTCAE, exercise files, media, and under Uber stock, there is a video called Crosswalk W MP4. We're going to open that. Do not be alarmed. You'll see a white frame at the beginning. That's because many of these videos, these Uberstock videos or these media sources that we use have a few, sometimes one or a few dead frames at the beginning. People freak out. They think it's empty or it's not working. It's there. So we're going to grab that. We're going to drag it to the new comp button. And once again, there's our white frame. Page down, page down, page down, page down, page down a few times. Maybe a lot of times. There it is. So we have to scrub a few seconds in. So if you ever import something and it looks like an error or it's blank or something like that, scrub. Just scrub and see what's there. So our goal is at about 13 seconds and 5 frames, right about here. We want to try to cut this guy out. Now, our intention is not to cut him out and replace it with, air. What we're trying to do is cut him out of this shot and use it somewhere else. So we're trying to cut those guys' legs out and repurpose them. The problem is there's a lot of motion blur, and there's something in the Rotobrush tool that accounts for motion blur, and it's not going to be perfect. The example that I'm going to show you, it's not intended to be perfect. It's intended just to show you how it works, okay? It works really well if the subject is not moving that much. But if there is movement, there's a way to deal with it. So the first thing you need to understand is that we have to double click the layer. So this layer exists in a composition. If I double click it in the timeline, you'll notice that a new window pops up, and it's called the layer panel. So there's the composition panel and there's the layer panel. The Rotobrush only works in the layer panel. So if you forget this step, nothing's going to happen. Nothing will work. So what we're trying to do is load this clip into a new panel that allows us to rotoscope out just the legs. And that rotoscope result will be manifested in the composition. You'll see that. So the Rotobrush tool is this thing here. It's actually a little symbol of a guy with a paintbrush. And if you float over it, you'll see Rotobrush tool, drag over foreground, option, drag over background. So it tells you what to do. I'm going to click that, and I'm going to make sure that I'm at the correct time code, which is 1305. This is the first starting frame of this example. And we are going to just draw. I'm going to draw this green line to select. And notice it does a pretty good job of selecting that leg. It missed the toe. We don't want to cut his toe off. So I'll add by clicking and dragging again. Every time you click and drag, it adds that portion to the selection. Sometimes it'll make a mistake and it will select outside of the region we want, and we then need to subtract that. So who knows the key to subtract a selection? It's a modifier key, option. So option, notice that the crosshair turns from green to red. Do you see that crosshair? You guys see that? That's a green crosshair. If I hold option, it turns red. And now when I click and drag, I get a red line. See what happens? So here we go. I'm going to keep selecting, keep selecting. I'm going to do the best job I can. Every time that the computer selects an area I don't want, I hold option and I drag. So green adds, red subtracts. How do you get red? Hold option. It's that simple. So that's a decent selection. It's not perfect, it's decent. There's a magenta line that shows you the selection. Our problem is that this is one frame, and we have video, which is 24 or 30 frames per second. So wouldn't it be a real pain to have to do that for every single frame? Well, you don't have to. But before we do the automated process moving forward, we're going to switch to a new view to see how this looks. I want you to notice that when you are in the layer panel, you get the option for toggle alpha boundary, toggle alpha overlay, alpha boundary overlay color, which is of course the magenta line, the opacity of that, set an in point, set an out point. Freeze is something that we click on when we're done, but we're nowhere near done. So I'm going to switch to this alpha channel here. And you'll notice that this is a rather rigid selection. There are very hard boundaries between the black area, which is now being removed, and the white area, which is being retained. And I want you to remember another really important rhyme, and that is that black conceals, white reveals. So if you have a black area when you're in this alpha view, we won't see it. Black conceals. White reveals. So any pixels that are white, you will see. That's how you can remember. So white you'll see, black you won't. Okay. We need to change some parameters. The parameters exist in the Effect Controls panel under the Rotobrush and Refine Edge effect. So actually, when we started using this tool, it added a special effect to the clip, to the layer. So it's very important that we check on use motion blur, and I want you to notice what already happened. Do you see how the edges are a little softer now? See that? So that's part of fixing this problem, is checking on the motion blur box. We also need to check on higher quality. So you can see when you check something on and off, it changes it. We get even more feathering, essentially. Now we're going to change the samples per frame to 20. This is how many times it analyzes the frame in order to create the roto boundary. And that's all we have to do. We are now going to hit spacebar and watch it try. And it fails. And that's normal. So I'm going to scrub backward. I'm going to switch back to this mode here. Select the layer. And I want you to notice that it made some mistakes. We're going to go back to layer crosswalk. And you notice how it sort of leaves behind the background there? So we would need to fix that. How do we remove that? Option drag. Oops, went too far. If you ever go too far, undo. Command Z. Too far again, undo. So what I want you to realize is that this is not a perfect process, but it does do a decent job of cutting out these legs in an automated way, okay? Now let's say that we did get it perfect. We adjusted frame by frame, and we want to keep that roto selection. We would push freeze, and it will lock that Rotobrush. Now, what happened in the actual composition itself? Well, if we switch to composition view by clicking this, this is the original video, and you'll notice that the background is now gone. It's been cut out. So then this is an alpha layer because that black is actually not part of this layer. We can in fact change the composition settings to background color of red, for example. And that's what's really going on here. You know, there is no black. The legs have been cut out. The background is gone. And now we can take this guy's legs and put them in some other video image. This is a hard example because it doesn't do a good job of cutting out the legs when the legs are moving and there's motion blur. But you have to understand that the parameters I showed you are how you get it to do a better job. Okay? So that's it. It doesn't have to be perfect. I want to see that you've got a few frames that show the legs cut out. Even if the background is messed up like that, it's fine. I just want to see that you played with the Rotobrush. So once we're done, I'm going to put that composition setting background color back to black. We're going to export. So we go to File, Export. Make sure that you're in the composition and not in the layer, okay? Composition, File, Export, Add to Render Queue, change Lossless, Format Options. Always change this animation to something better like Apple ProRes 422 Proxy. Hit OK, choose OK. Output 2. We're going to choose your hard drive, scroll down, MDC, DIG, in-class exercise. This one has a name already. Here it is. Last name, first initial, underscore E5, underscore Rotobrush. And then we're going to hit save. Then we push the render button. Oh, it's exporting our whole thing, but we don't want the whole thing. We just want the part that we worked on, right? So let's back up. Let's hit stop. All right, render queue is empty. Go back here. If I want to export just a portion, like let's say from 1305, I push B at 1305, which gives me the beginning of the work area. Down, page down, I'm going page down, page down, page down. And let's say that's all I want to do. N. I push the N key, and that's the work area end. All right. Now it's only going to export from the beginning to the end. This part right here. That's it. That's all I want. So let's do it again. File, export, add to render queue, change lossless, format options, change to Apple ProRes 422 Proxy, hit OK, choose OK. Output 2, let's call it what we want to call it. Save, replace, render. Now it only exports the few frames that I told it to. I'll let it finish. It's very quick. So let's go back a second. Let's try to improve this thing. Let's do it from scratch so we can review. I'll delete the whole thing, go to project, delete that comp, take the video, drag it to the new comp button, get to the time code that you need to, which is 1305. Double click the layer, it loads it into the layer panel. Choose the Rotobrush tool, draw on the leg. Okay. Remember, green is to add, hold option to subtract. Green add, option subtract, green add, green add. Don't cut off the toe. All right, that's pretty decent. That's a person in the background, I think. Let's go change the parameters again. Use motion blur. Look at what happens to the pink line now. Go into motion blur, higher quality, samples per frame, 20 was the magic number there. Enter. Now let's move one frame forward. See what's happening? So if we want to correct this, why don't we go one frame forward? It's trying, okay? And just fix it. Option minus. And as you spend more time fixing each frame, the computer gets smarter and smarter and does a better job each time. So you don't want to have to correct every frame in full. That's not bad. Okay, let's go forward one frame again. Page down. It tried. It failed. Option. And I got to tell you, I know from attending the Adobe conference that this technology is improving drastically, and it will be fully automated within the next 5 years, I believe. And we won't even have to do this little Rotobrush tool anymore. It'll just work. It'll know what you're trying to do, and the AI will do it for you. That's not bad. I'll take it. Page down. Option, subtract all this junk. You understand? Page down moves you one frame at a time. This is what you have to do if you want to do a good job. Motion blur is rough. Okay, it's getting okay now. That's not bad. Page down. See, anytime there's a little background you don't want, option, drag. That, I think, is a gap in the legs. Oh, it's doing good now. Oh, see all this junk up here on the top left? So starting here, this is useless. Page down, page down, page down. I can't tell if that's leg or not. Page down. That's not. Page down. That's definitely not. Uh-oh. Page down. Now let's see how that part looks. We'll go into our composition. And remember, it's not going to be perfect, but it's definitely better. And we started at 1305, right about here. That part's pretty good. Okay, get it? That's Rotobrush.